don't worry, they'll grow out of it. Man, this is the number one most frustrating and honestly most unhelpful thing that parents hear from their pediatricians, their providers, Dr. Google. This is so off base, and I want to dig into why this is so unhelpful for our kids, and then honestly what a better path is and how to avoid the future challenges that often come if you just wait for them to grow out of whatever challenge they're experiencing. But first, this is just so frustrating because one, it just does not help you, right? If you have a baby that is colicky and fussy, or they're spitting up and they're refluxy, they're constipated, they're dealing with recurring ear infections, whatever the challenge is that is leading to this conversation of, sorry, just wait and see, they'll grow out of it. That phrase leaves you feeling even more helpless because you want to help your kid, right? You want to help them get out of the misery, get off the struggle path and the struggle bus that they're on, and instead you're left with just wait because they will grow out of it eventually. So we hate it because parents need support in that moment. But listen, I could understand if there wasn't really any other options and if they did eventually move on and it wasn't a big deal. But what's worse is that is just not true. We see over and over and over again the kids that grow out of those early challenges grow into the next version of them. And what we need to do is kind of flip our understanding here, which is different than how traditional healthcare works, right? We think of all these different diseases or challenges as the problem, right? We think of the colic or the gassiness or the spitting up or whatever the issue is. We think of that as a siloed, isolated thing. And really the whole goal of healthcare is just treating symptoms. It doesn't really ever look internally at the cause or at the why, and we're just trying to mask or manage symptoms. So when we have that perspective, we've got our different specialists, right? You've got your GI specialist or your ENT or your whatever else is going on. And they miss how to actually help that kid as a whole. You miss how to actually help them be healthy. Because what we see is with all of these different challenges, they've got one underlying cause. They've got one underlying mechanism at play. And if that doesn't get addressed, the same thing that shows up as colic in a newborn is going to show up as ear infections in an older kid, or it's going to show up as torticollis and plagiocephaly, this flattening in the back of the head. And once they grow out of that, it's going to show up as chronic strep or tonsils and adenoids being inflamed, and then dealing with these recurring immune challenges later on. And once they grow out of that, maybe with the help of another surgery, tubes, tonsils, adenoids removed, now they have chronic maybe asthma, or they just get sick all the time. And we're starting down this path that we see over and over again show up as then maybe motor and speech delays for kids as they get older. We see it show up as sensory processing challenges, maybe anxiety or emotional regulation issues, all the way up to focus with kids, right? They're struggling with schoolwork and they're struggling to do their homework and behave in classrooms. And that whole downstream we see start with stressed out kids. We see it start with a colicky, fussy, spitting up baby. And so instead of saying they'll grow out of it and then fast forwarding 8 years and now you've got a kid on ADHD and anxiety medications, let's look backwards and start to address the why sooner. So that is the flip. That is the different shift and understanding we need to have, is not just focusing on the symptoms, because sure, a baby does eventually not have colic, even if you don't do anything other than wait. But just because they grow out of the colic, if the cause remains, if the why behind that remains, it's just going to show up as something else. And that is the perfect storm pathway that we are so obsessed with getting kids off of, right? And that's honestly the key to kind of go on a little side tangent here. That's the key of care, specifically care plans, is that it might, sure, just take a couple of adjustments to help your kid move their head better, help your kid not be quite as fussy or latch and nurse better, but it's that consistent care that really resets that neurological pathway and that neurological default mode that the kid has developed up until that point. So that is our underlying point here, is let's not just focus on the symptoms, let's get to that deeper part. And I wish we had a different perspective on this really when it comes to immune stuff, right? Because a lot of times when we have more immune-based challenges in those first couple of years of life or first couple of months, we have a more aggressive approach on those, right? As soon as there's a tiny little symptoms, you want to take a Tylenol or an Advil or some sort of medication to bring the fever down, or take something to dry up the congestion or to make the cough go away, or you're quick to grab an antibiotic for the ear infection or for whatever the other concern is. We're really, really quick to medicate and treat immune challenges, which honestly is not the best route, right? We want to give the body time to kick the sick. We want to let the fever do its thing and support healing instead of just try to suppress symptoms, because that way we're able to build up immunity in our internal defenses, and those internal troops that are supposed to be fighting those bad guys off, they can build some strength and do a better job. instead of letting that work, instead of letting that process run its course, we are quick to intervene and then quick to then suppress our own immunity. But then the flip side of that, the more neurologically based challenges, like everything we've been discussing here, those are the ones that we have this wait and see approach. And those are the ones we just kick the can down the road and hope it goes away eventually. Or we just wait until it's bad enough to qualify for some other treatment or therapy. Like, for example, plagiocephaly, right? If there's a little bit of a flat spot on a kid's head at 2 months, you might bring it up with the provider and they're like, yeah, I mean, let's watch it, let's wait and see. And then at 4 months, you come back and it's way worse. And at that point, it's like, oh, now we've got something to do. Let's put him in a helmet, let's put him in PT or rehab or whatever else is needed. Where in reality, if we would address that sooner, it's a lot easier to get a hold of, right? It's a lot easier to undo that stress in a 2-month-old than it is a 4 or a 6-month-old. Man, I could go on and on and on with different examples of this, but I hope you understand the message here is do not wait. Do not just say they'll grow out of it eventually and life will be easier. One, because it doesn't help you in the moment. It doesn't help you survive the day. And also, it's just not true. Those problems are going to get worse and they're going to manifest differently later on. I hope that helped, guys. I hope that encourages you to trust your parent, your mom gut, because when you're going through that, you know that things aren't okay, right? We hear it time and time again from parents. They know that things aren't right, and they want answers and they want help. They just don't know where to turn. We actually just had that experience recently where it was a new baby, just a couple months old, that was coming in, dealing with some head flattening, some fussiness, some GI stuff. And as we were talking through what that likely future path looked like, you could see some of the dots connect and some of the wires cross for mom, because that was her 2-year-old son's journey. Had a similar start to life, similar stresses, similar birth trauma, and then he was a couple years farther down that road and he had the ear infections and he had the chronic immune stuff, and she's like, oh my gosh, this is true because I've already lived it and I want to get off of that for my first kid, or sorry, for the baby that they're coming in for, but also let's get that older kid off of that pathway too and get him back to healing and thriving. Like I said, hope that helps. Please send us a message. I know that probably brings up other thoughts or questions. Reach out to the team, chat, next time you're in the office if you're one of our current Thrive patients, or if this is someone who isn't already getting adjusted, you're listening and you're wanting to know what does that look like to get my kid off that path, what can you do besides just wait and see, definitely reach out to our team. Let's do those neurological scans and assessment, actually measure and track the cause, the why of those issues that your kid is dealing with, and then put together a game plan to get them off of that path and back to healing. Have a great day, guys. We'll see you soon.